the boxes here with your faces. I wish we were all together in a room somewhere. In fact, I wish you were all here at my home and we could be gathering with some tea or some prosecco or some hot cider or whatever would seem appropriate. But we have to settle for this virtual type of communication. But it is certainly better than not being with you tonight. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cynthia Terrell. And indeed, I would definitely be doing some baking. If you all could come over, Talisha, you know where I live. Michelle, you know where I live. My name is Cynthia Terrell. And for context, I have known Michelle probably about 10 years. Is that true, Michelle? When London was 1 year old, I think I met you.
So yeah, around 9 years or so. Well, actually, no, she'll be turning 11, so probably 10 years. Yeah,
Ooh, 10
yeah,
years.
yeah,
A decade of friendship.
yeah.
And for those of you who really have no idea who I am, I'll just say quickly that I'm Cynthia, and I helped to found an organization about 30 years ago with my husband and others called Fair Vote that kind of kicked off this whole conversation. We didn't invent the conversation, but we sort of reignited it, if you will, about electoral reform and about other reforms that Michelle joined the team at Fair Vote. That's how I met her. And we talked about a lot of reforms and policies. And Michelle, I don't want to embarrass you, but I remember your interview so well because I believe you spoke about your grandfather and the essential importance of being able to vote and being able to access the vote and having a meaningful vote. And once there was the opportunity to vote, to be able to cast a vote that really mattered and led to representation. And those words have stuck by me as I have moved on from working at Fair Vote with Michelle. Michelle's also worked on, and I started an organization called Represent Women that is focused on addressing the barriers that women face in politics as candidates and elected officials. One of the barriers that women and others face are our electoral systems. And so the connective tissue here is that I serve on the board of Ranked Choice Voting Maryland very happily, and Michelle Whittaker, surprise, surprise, serves on the chair of the Represent Women board. So we are really sisters in this reform work, and I am always so impressed with the work that Michelle does in communities across Maryland, in Annapolis. Her communications game is like an A++. She knows her legislative business. And you're going to have a chance to hear from Michelle in a minute. And also from the box on my right here is the mayor of Takoma Park, Talisha Searcy, who's an amazing woman leader whom I'm also so glad to call a friend and an ally in this work to really give voters more power. So you're going to get a chance to hear from them. We're going to entertain some questions. I'm sure some of you will have some super productive and constructive questions. I will take a moment, I see Tamaya, my colleague here, has turned her camera on. She's doing a lot of supportive work in Maryland to be helping us build a really strong coalition. So folks can follow up with her with questions in the chat as well. But just want to be completely candid here. Michelle and the team at Ranked Choice Voting Maryland really need our support to make sure they can continue to do this work. So I'll make a bit more of an emphatic pitch at the end. But while dollars for democracy policies and reforms are a little bit on hold, given some strategizing that's happening, I'm really trying to do all that I can to raise some money to help Michelle and support her team and Owen. So that's one of the reasons that you're gathered all here together. But leading up to that pitch, I'm gonna invite you to hear, I think first from the fabulous Michelle Whittaker to talk a little about what brings her to this work.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you everyone for being here. Cynthia, it was really touching that you mentioned my grandfather, and he is very much part of my story all the time when I talk about democracy and elections. And, often people are like, what was your first experience like? And I don't, thinking back to my first experience, it was when I was 18 or something. I'm not sure if it was really something that was moving, but the most moving experience was actually the last time that my grandfather was able to vote. and that was in the 2008 election. And it was one where he was so proud to be able to cast a vote, um, because he finally felt like there was someone he was voting for who represented him for president of the United States, that reflected his background as an immigrant, someone who came into this country and really dedicated his life as a merchant marine to really give back in terms of service. And so I always think about that moment because my grandfather lived in New York and I was down here in DC, but he was emphatic with me and all of my sisters about how we needed to make sure he had his ride to get to the polls. And we were checking on that. We're like, Grandpa, you got you covered. We're going to make sure that happens. And then he was like, and then I need my celebratory brandy after the polls so I could do a little toast, for everything that's going on. And we're like, Grandpa, we got you. You'll get that too. And it's just one of those things where, for my entire life, he is someone who's been an inspiration for me. And it's been an inspiration for the work that I do, that I think for everyone, they should feel passionate about that, going in and participating in democracy in whatever way, from the ballot box to going to public hearings to getting to meet your legislators and knowing who those are and talking about other policies that are impacting you. I want to make sure that people have that ability to do that, and that's one of the reasons why I am now the executive director for Ranked Choice Voting Maryland, but have worked for Fair Vote and other groups across that do work both nationally as well as in the state, that have been focused on giving and empowering everyday people to be the power behind our democracy and what we do. So I'm very excited to just share more with you, but I just wanted to give you kind of that little introduction. I live in Montgomery County, but obviously my work takes me across all over the state, and I love doing that. I really do love traveling and getting to see different parts and to talk about reforms. And I love talking about ranked choice voting. I also love talking about the suites of reforms that we need to really make sure that we are totally empowered. And there's not one single reform that fixes everything and makes democracy work. It is making sure that you have all of those reforms working together in sync to give people the power that they need, to have the representation that matters, to make sure that they can move the policies that are impacting their communities, to make sure that that there is a voice for them, a seat at that table. And so that's what I try to work on, and that's what I'm excited about to share with you. And I'm so glad to have Mayor Searcy here, who's someone who I've gotten a chance to campaign for her for a little bit, go door to door and hang out with her mom. She's got a fabulous mom and family. So, I want to give her a chance to do an introduction and share more about herself.
Thanks so much, Michelle, and welcome, Talisha. It's so fun. I have a tight-knit group of friends in Takoma Park, and we try to show up for Talisha whenever she's having an event, inside, outside, and then it's been great to run into Talisha at these meetings of Maryland legislators and municipal employees, and I feel like, wow, Talisha's a great voice in this work for democracy and giving voters real power. So welcome. So glad to have you here, and would love for you to say a few words.
Well, thank you all so much for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I want to thank Cynthia and Michelle both. I mean, prior to moving to Takoma Park, I never would have seen myself as a politician, and that is what the true power of having people in your community, women who drop that nugget of, hey, have you considered, or I will help you. Michelle came to my house and she's like, you know what? I'm going to be at the polls. I'm going to help you. And I'm like, I barely know who you are, but thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we have been friends ever since. And I know that we're going to talk about ranked choice voting, and we're going to talk about the power of democracy. We're going to talk about the things that we need to do to elevate one another as women. But I would be remiss if I didn't just highlight that point of the value of having women in your network, women who believe, women who are willing to put themselves and their families out there to really try to help support other women. It's something that is so valuable and so needed if one of our goals is to try to get more women elected into office. So thank you both, Cynthia and Michelle. So I fell in into politics a little bit in Takoma Park. Started out as a neighborhood association president, just felt like we needed to do more to uplift the community, and started working within my local neighborhood, and then ran for city council. I was on the city council representing Ward 6 in Takoma Park for about 5 years. I was elected in 2017, and was elected as mayor in 2022, as the first Black elected mayor of the city of Takoma Park. So it has been a bit of a whirlwind, but one of the things that has been added lots of fun, and I know we'll do deeper dives into this, but ranked choice voting. I ran with 2 opponents, so we tested ranked choice voting to the max during my first race. And so there's a lot that goes into not only running for even the city of Takoma Park. Is about 18,000, a little over 18,000 people, 2.4 square miles, but you have to work. And it also means when you're talking about ranked choice voting, understanding and catering not just to your base, but also catering to those residents that perhaps maybe have someone else in mind, and really trying to reach each person. So it is so important for us to make sure that not only our community understands their rights, the rights to vote, to really engage people from a civic perspective, but also that we as women work really hard to drop those nuggets of support to other women or other groups that otherwise go underrepresented in elected office, So I definitely look forward to this conversation, and I look forward to engaging with each and every one of you. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much, Talisha. And our third panelist or speaker is Councilmember Laurie-Anne Sayles. I'm not sure she's with us right now. She may also be in transit. Owen, any?
Yes, I am.
Oh, yay. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Yes, I snuck in while Mayor Searcy was introducing herself.
Wonderful.
Yes, I'm calling in from DC. I'm here for the National Association of Counties meeting. I'm trying to better understand, what's at stake, resources for our federal workers who have been displaced or are just in an unknown space. So this is so relevant with midterms coming up. And with DC's passage, I know there are other jurisdictions looking to see how this will influence future elections. So happy to be here, and we'll be on camera soon.
Oh, that's amazing. Sounds like I'm really glad you're doing what you're doing. Sounds really important. So much is in motion right now, isn't it? It feels like we all have to be on alert for whatever is going on in our communities, and of course in the broader community of this country that requires all of our energy around democracy right now. I think it could be interesting to talk some about your perspectives, all 3 of you. Michelle, you have been a campaign manager in a ranked choice voting election that also had public matching funds, and Talisha, you just spoke about running in a ranked choice voting election, and I know, Laurie-Anne, you have run in a non-ranked choice voting election, but have come to appreciate the value of ranked choice voting. So it would just be interesting to hear from each of you just some of your thoughts about the value of ranked choice voting and additional reforms that might be part of that package, Michelle, that you referenced. Then I think we can have a little bit of a conversation amongst the panelists, and then I suspect that the folks on this call will want to hear what's going on in Annapolis in terms of, Michelle, the incredible work that you've been doing there the last 2 months, and then may have some other questions around what's going on with the movement for RCV in general. So, but why don't we start out just with a few sort of first takes on the impact of reforms like ranked choice voting and maybe public financing. And Michelle, maybe you can say a few more words about that first.
Yeah, so happy to kick that off and just say, I'm going to forward project this first, that what I would really love to happen is that within the next 10 years, I am going to be voting in a ranked choice voting election, because I live outside of Takoma Park. So I know, yes, Yes, Mayor Searcy, I could move to Takoma Park, and I'll keep that on my radar as possibly doing that. But I think also the entire county should be able to do this. The entire state should be able to have ranked choice voting, and so I'm going to put it out there that in the near future I will be able to actually participate in a ranked choice voting election. But in the interim, what I have done is help to support candidates who have run in ranked choice voting elections and use public financing. And I think those are two really great combinations together. And the reason why relates to what we've talked about in terms of who gets to run for office and who really, how do you make sure your voice and the voice of community members are heard. And when we have ranked choice voting, you can really make sure that you're expressing your vote for the candidates that you really prefer and who represent your issues. And when you have public financing, you add this additional layer where we take that power out of those big money interests or big money campaigns that really make people feel like they aren't going to have a voice because they aren't going to raise that same amount of money, or they're just donating, a little bit, so they're, nobody's going to care about their issues. Public financing has really transformed everyday donors, everyday voters into the powerhouse machines behind elections. And when I was the campaign manager for Janice Lewis George in Washington, D.C., running in Ward 4. And that was a fantastic race to go around and talk to people about public financing and say that when you give, your dollars are multiplied because you're a resident in the district and with their public financing matching system. And then when in Montgomery County, I got to do the same thing too for 2 races here in Montgomery County to talk about the impact and the power of public financing, which I know also Councilmember Sayles is familiar with and knows the power of how that really helps women candidates to be able to run, helps candidates from different communities actually have a chance and compete at the same level in terms of those financing and having those dollars. And for anyone who is, whether you're in Montgomery County or other parts of the state that have public financing programs, you may be able to get to use them in the 2026 election if there are candidates who are going in the public financing system. So again, it's a way for you to multiply your voice in terms of maximizing it for candidates and community interests that you have. And when you put those two together, really what it helps to do is that women, we know women, it takes, the research says it takes a while for women to go and run, and to get those, they need, as Mayor Searcy said, that encouragement and having a network of women who are backing them up and supporting them. And whether, if you're a woman, you're from an immigrant community or another marginalized group, when you have reforms that really help people to understand to feel like you have a level playing field and a voice that you can project into the discussion that really focuses the issues, it changes the game about what we talk about how we interact with one another, and really seeing people who I think in past have not viewed them as viable candidates, they suddenly become not only viable but winning candidates who are bringing a new voice to their elected positions. And so we need to continue to do more of that. And so I hope that we'll see that combination grow in not only in Montgomery County, but across Maryland. And as we see that Councilmember Sayles mentioned that DC passed this, they need to go through the next step. And so we need to make sure that they fully fund the program for DC, and they're going to be able to use that in future elections. And I think it's going to be, again, a really transformative experience that helps people have a stronger voice in their elections. So yeah, it's really kind of exciting to see how those reforms work together. And it's exciting to see that there are those opportunities for us to do that and to, change the picture of who usually runs for office, which I think impacts and influences and inspires others to feel like they have a path forward to be in that role.
Thanks, Michelle. I think listeners might be really interested to hear a little bit from you, Talisha, just about some of the specifics about how having a ranked ballot in Takoma Park maybe changed your approach to running, and with the, I guess, what we hear from other jurisdictions is that candidates tend to speak to every voter because they know there's the chance to get support, whether it's a second or a third or a first place vote from every voter. So it gives voters a little more power, and it gives candidates a little more latitude to seek support. Wonder if you have any thoughts on how that's worked for you in your campaigns.
Yes, and to all of the above. I think the first thing that has been really critical is making sure that you understand ranked choice or instant runoff enough to be able to educate your constituency. So the biggest thing has been just lots of education, educating members of the community on how to complete their ballots and just making sure that they're aware that there's, you don't leave it blank. It's not a bad thing if you don't vote for me, but if there's someone else that you like more, it's okay for you to pick them. And so that's been a really big thing for the city of Takoma Park, is making sure that entities like our Board of Elections and other groups are really educating residents. But as a candidate, you also have to reinforce that. And as you are campaigning, you have to reinforce that as well, that they have multiple choices, right? So you want to make sure that you're educating your constituency. And then another big thing is learning about the needs of all of your constituents. There were many times when I was door knocking where I could clearly see my opponent's sign in someone's yard. But that doesn't, under ranked choice, you still have to knock on that door and reinforce, hey, I see you have someone else's sign. Let me just tell you about me. Let me hear about some of the things that you're interested in. I am happy to be your second choice. And so it does put you in a place, and it does put all candidates in a place. Now, are they going to necessarily agree with all of the needs of all of the constituents that may vote for one candidate or another? No. But it forces all candidates to at least be open to listening to those constituents that maybe wouldn't pick them as their first choice, and not necessarily just run their campaign based on what they believe to be their base. And so that is something that I think has been really important. The city of Takoma Park first passed its ranked choice voting via ballot referendum in 2005. And so our first election was in 2007. And so we've been consistently using ranked choice. And sometimes it actually, I personally feel like this last election, we had three elections that were ranked. Yeah, there was wards 3, 6, and I feel like there was one more, but there was sometimes when we would have multiple races that are ranked, where there are 3 candidates. And one of the things that I do believe happened a lot, and I saw an example of this in the last campaign, was someone who ran who was a very single issue kind of person. They ran on one particular thing, but because they were in the race, and even though there was a high probability that they probably weren't going to win, but because they were in the race, that one issue that they cared a lot about enough to be able to run really got a spotlight. It really made people say, hey, what is happening with this particular apartment building that needs renovation and there are problems? So there are some ways that ranked choice can be used, not just to educate residents around the value of using their collective democratic power to elect who they think are the best candidates amongst a group, but to also force candidates to listen to the full spectrum of folks that are that they may be appealing to or their constituency, but also gives a little bit more of a microphone to those candidates that maybe are those single issue folks, those really tight issue people. It gives them a little bit more of a platform to where, yes, we know they're probably not going to win the race, but their issue has gotten a lot of attention, which is also valuable.
Thank you, Mayor Searcy. I think that really drives home one of the impacts that we don't always talk about, but definitely seems to be true in Takoma Park and elsewhere where this has been implemented. New York City comes to mind, and Oakland and Minneapolis, I think, have all had very similar experiences. So thanks for that perspective. And Councilmember Sayles, do you have any thoughts you want to share about some of your experiences running in a non-ranked choice voting election so far? Michelle's going to tell us how Montgomery County is going to change soon, but what's been your experience as a council member candidate running in a winner-take-all election, if there's any contrasting points there that you want to lift up?
Of course. I mean, the two elections that I ran, I previously served on the Gaithersburg City Council. Now I serve on the Montgomery County Council. Both races I've run successfully have been at large. Basically ranking the candidates without knowing that they were ranking us. There wasn't a ranking number, but it was, the top 3 for city council because we had staggered elections. And so it was county-wide. Everyone had to vote for us. And similar to my council at large race, luckily I had matching funds for council at large. So as Michelle mentioned, those matching funds are a game changer. By the end of November, I had raised maybe $80,000, and I raised the least amount of money in my race and still came in second place. And this was out of 8 candidates. I was on the second page. There was a huge controversy because no one knew that because the ballots were so long that I was going to be on another page. And still I was able, because it was the top 4 out of 8 candidates that were successful and moved on to the general election. So we just have to ensure that there are resources available to educate residents on what this looks like. But because we have such a similar way of doing things, the education piece is going to be the only addition. There weren't significant investments that needed to be made to update the ballot. You can still advertise in League of Women Voters and still have your forums. There would just have to be enough time to educate residents on how this system works and how similar it is to things that we already have. So whether you're in a municipality or if you've voted in the county election, you've been doing this, similar to the Board of Education. So we have a way of doing this and transitioning. So I'm excited that someone is leading us at the state level because they're so familiar with how things are running, what the legislation looks like, the discussions that we've already had. We have too many case studies right here in Maryland that make this a natural progression for how we run elections, especially with the midterms coming up. I'm hoping this happens pretty quickly. So I'm glad we're having this conversation now. I'm glad you have women during Women's History Month, 3 trailblazers. Thank you so much for spotlighting us, Cynthia, and everything that you're doing to keep this conversation going and growing.
Thank you, Councilmember Sayles. Yes, I'm so glad to be working alongside all 3 of you on this important work. And I will say just a couple quick data points on the impact of ranked choice voting overall nationally for women is that women hold 52% of seats in jurisdictions with ranked choice voting, and that's about twice the norm. And so that's something we can ask some questions about, but ranked choice voting is also opening up the system for younger voters, from what our data tells us, and lower income candidates in some instances, particularly in, say, New York City, are more able to participate because of the conjunction of public financing with ranked choice voting. And replacing a runoff in a place like New York City means that the campaign process is just that much more accessible when people don't have to raise so much money to compete. But I suspect viewers or participants on this call would be really interested in an update on what is going on in Maryland. I know there's been a work on several different pieces of legislation, as well as some municipal campaigns, Michelle. So maybe you want to give everybody a heads up on those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And want to give a shout out to folks that are on this call who some of our volunteer leads and folks who've just given of their time and efforts in different ways. I'm not going to try and name all of you, but you all are on my heart and in my head, just not coming out of my mouth at the moment, so I can focus on some other things. But we do have some legislation that we're working on with the General Assembly. We also have work that we're doing with municipalities, which is really exciting. And as I've shared with people before in different groups, and I'm going to say it again because that's how I'm going to make sure that I'm saying it out loud so that we can all help manifest this into reality. But I believe we will have, if not one, two, at least two cities that are adopting ranked choice voting by the end of this year, by the end of 2025. And they're actively having discussions on this. They're actively looking at it. And we have great partners at the state level with the State Board of Elections to really work through all of the things that we need to do to make sure that there's a smooth implementation and they know how this is going to work for their local elections. So I'm excited for that, and we're going to keep doing the work. And I want to thank the folks that we have on the call who are helping to make that happen at the grassroots level. In the General Assembly, we have two main bills that we're working on. One is to allow for ranked choice voting for statewide presidential primaries. The bill numbers are HB 215 and SB 383. Those both had the House and Senate bill had their hearings in their respective chambers. The House bill is sponsored by Delegate Chris Fair from Frederick, and the Senate bill is sponsored by Montgomery County Senator Senator Cheryl Kagan. And so we're continuing to have dialogue with members of both the House and Senate to see how we can continue to move this forward. But it's opening up that discussion of what we need to look at for the future. If this bill is able to pass, what would happen is that by for our 2028 election, we would be able to implement it for that election and have it available for the statewide presidential primaries, which happen for the Republican and Democratic parties. And for both of those parties, we know they should have multiple candidates who are vying for the nomination of their presidential party. And so we need to have systems in place that help that. One of the benefits of having ranked choice voting is especially because of when Maryland's primary happens, let's say you have, 10 or 15 candidates who run for the nomination. It can easily happen that by Super Tuesday in March, we've had candidates who drop out. And then by the time we get to our primary, or if you've started, voting early, you might be voting for somebody who's no longer in the race, or you've already cast a ballot for somebody who later drops out of the race, maybe after the ballot. And so having ranked choice voting makes sure that everyone can continue to have a voice. You don't have wasted or zombie ballots that happen in the presidential primary. So we want to help that, which in the 2016 election, I think we had 3 million votes that were wasted in that way because of candidates dropping out in that. The other bill that we have is a local option bill for Montgomery County to be able to use ranked choice voting or approval voting for local elections. And as I said before, I'm really excited about this, and I want to say that yes, in the near future, I will be able to vote in my county with using this. And here's 3 data points just to talk about why this matters. And Councilmember Sayles knows this. We both intimately worked on, we're involved in the 2022 campaign where we had 8 candidates running for at large. The growth of ranked choice voting Maryland came out of the 2018 election when we had 33 candidates running for at large, 7 to 10 candidates running for either a district or the county executive seat. And everybody kind of walked out of that situation, out of the primaries, and was like, we need a way where we can really express our voice, and we have candidates who win with a majority of the vote. And here's why. Because every Democratic primary in Montgomery County, in the county executive race, every single primary since 2014 has been a non-majority winner in that race. Since 2014. So this has been going on for now over 10 years that we've had this issue with that. In 2018, in the Democratic primary, only 1 out of the 5 winners in district council races won with a majority. Only 1 out of those 5. And in the 2022 elections, where we added 2 district seats, and we had 4 at-large seats, 4 out of the 7 winners in the district races won with less than a majority. So this is a persistent problem that is happening in our races. And we need to make sure that we have a way for everyone to have a voice, for that voice to be heard, and for a majority winner, a consensus candidate, to rise out of those opportunities. And that's where HB 1094 is really the opportunity for us to move that forward. It has the full support of the Montgomery County Council. Thank you, Councilmember Sayles. Has the full support of the Takoma Park City Council and Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Searcy. It has the full support of the Montgomery County delegation. So we have the opportunity to move this forward. And so I want to make sure, and I know Owen may have put it into the chat, or he will do right now, there's a link for you to message all of the members of the Ways and Means Committee to say that you want to make sure this bill moves forward. But even if with that moving forward and you adding your voice, the other piece that we need to do is to continue to have the resources, and Cynthia will talk more about this, but for us to do the work at Annapolis. Last week I was there for half the week. There's been other weeks where I'm there, I'm there traveling basically every day, if not every other day, to try and talk to legislators, to meet with other folks who in our democracy table, to really engage on not only these issues, but other issues that we are supportive of in the larger world of how we improve our democratic processes and the participation for all voters. And so we want to continue that work. So I hope that you'll stay active with us, see the opportunities that we have at the state level to move things forward, and then also get involved at the local level. As I think Owen put in the chat about Annapolis, the opportunity that we have in Annapolis and in Hyattsville to move that forward at the city level. Those are critical opportunities for us. And whether you live in the city or not, we can take all the volunteers that we need to help make sure that we can do door knocking, that we can go out and do outreach. And so we would love that opportunity to work with any of you, that if you're interested in doing that or supporting our work in other ways, to make sure that we can have that happen. But this has been a really exciting year for us, that we've done a lot of work to build up to this moment. And I'm really excited, and I want to see how we can move forward, because this would give, if we're able to move the enabling legislation. Montgomery County is the largest county in Maryland, 1.1 million residents. It would be amazing for us to do this for the local races and show how it works. And I think that would help get the ball rolling, as we see DC has adopted it, as Takoma Park has been our shining star in the state of using this since 2007. It really helps us move to the next level. And so I'm really excited about this. I'm excited about the opportunity. And I know it's going to make a really big difference in a county where we know that folks are running from different communities and want to have a voice. And everybody really is anxious from both that 2018 and the 2022 election of how can we make sure that our voices are heard and we have folks who are winning with that broad support. And this is our opportunity to make sure that happens in our state, and really kind of helps us move the ball forward and be a really big example for the rest of the country as well. So this is I'm very excited, if you can't tell, and this is what I'm really excited for this work, and it's been really a fun. And I want to again give kudos to Owen, who's the deputy director and my partner in crime in helping to make all of this happen. I also want to give a quick shout out to Sarah Lynch, who has been, she's done a lot of volunteering work. And when I was coming on last summer, she was always out there with us helping to organize and do stuff. So, there's lots of great folks that are on this call who are helping to make this happen. And you can be part of that too, going forward, and continue that, raising your voice with your legislators, as well as, helping to support the work that we're doing at a state and local level. So that's what I have to share. I'm excited, and you all can help be part of making 2025 the year of ranked choice voting in Maryland, and what we do as a whole to really change the dynamics and the conversations that we have for decades to come. And that's the opportunity we have here. So.
Oof, love that, Michelle. I'll sign up. Where can I do you? Put my name on the list.
There you go.
Before we wrap up, I realize people in the audience may have a few questions. I know my dear friend Mike Koenig has a question. Mike, do you want to ask your question, or do you want Owen or somebody to read it? I think it's a good question. I'm not sure whether Mike is on camera or not right now, but I'll ask Mike's question. Mike is a great ally in the RCV RCV national movement. His question is, does RCV tend to affect who runs?
Well, Cynthia, you might have more of the data on this, but I mean, I think what I have seen from reports that have been from Represent Women, as well as from Fair Vote and other independent organizations and professors who have done the research, is that it does add a level of, like, you have different folks that do want to run for office. I will not say that this is the one sole thing that decides the factor of whether somebody's going to run in the race. And it's multiple factors that usually contribute to that. So, you know, whether you have public financing, whether you have open seats in a race, whether you whatever else might be the dynamics of that election, all influence it. But ranked choice voting is a positive influence on a candidate's choice to run, and it's a positive influence, as Mayor Searcy mentioned, of like how you think about running, which is a great aspect of, like, to, as a campaign manager, to tell volunteers that, we're knocking on every door. So if you see a sign, we're not marking skip on that. We are going to that door, and we're going to ask a question, and we're going to get information. Again, it just changes the way you're thinking about elections. And I think that is a growing kind of transformation that isn't necessarily a data point that you're going to see in things, but it's, if anybody's been a campaign manager or done campaigns, that's not the way that we do it, And so being able to do something different, it helps to make everybody feel like there's something new here, there's something different that's happening. And that's also the power of, like, public financing. When you have that, people say, like, there's something new and different here. I can put in, for Montgomery County system, it's like, if I put in $25, that gets multiplied 4 or 5 times, or whatever the amount is, right? Like, where else does that happen? That's great. I want to do that. I want to sign up for that opportunity to be that, and to help a candidate run and for office. So yeah, I think that's you might have more of the data points on that, but I know, like, in terms of, like, the behaviors of how candidates run, how campaigns are managed, there's definitely, it's part of the calculus along with everything else.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And it is true that often women and men of color and others who are seen as unelectable are told to wait their turn by stakeholders or party officials sometimes, or donors or others. And so the nice thing about ranked choice voting is it really frees up more candidates to run with no fear that they're going to split the vote, and endorsing organizations can endorse multiple candidates, which was super exciting. I think for the New York City candidates, realized, like, wow, not only do the candidates themselves have an incentive to find common ground, but endorsing organizations have an incentive to reward candidates who are finding common ground by endorsing multiple candidates at the same time, which I think appeals to the moment that we are in, where voters want to see leadership really acting responsibly together on our behalf. And one of the reasons I think we don't see enough of that is our dysfunctional, polarized electoral environment, where to win, you really need to be pitted against your opponent. Whereas in a ranked choice voting election, there's much more value in finding that common ground. And I think that's one of the reasons, or that whole combination of reasons, is one of the reasons that it helps to elect more women candidates, simply partly because more women candidates run. They're not told to wait their turn. women sometimes have a tendency to be particularly good at finding common ground. The evidence shows that women tend to run for office to solve problems. And so it's a nice virtuous circle that women candidates are encouraged to run, more likely to be encouraged to run in a ranked choice voting election. They're more likely to do well and use the system well, because they're more likely to be able to say to voters, hey, if you're not going to rank me first, I hope I'll get your second or your third place ballot, your vote. So it engenders, no pun intended, this kind of a group process that is super powerful at the end of the day. And I will say, just a little factoid is that Maryland in 2024 got a D on our gender parity index, Represent Women's Gender Parity Index, which measures women's representation at the local, state, and federal level. Now, of course, because we've elected 2 women members to the House and a woman senator, those numbers are going to change and go up a little bit. We'll get a better grade in Maryland, but it still is pretty sobering. Nationwide, the majority of states get a D for women's representation. The majority of states get a D for women's representation. That just means that a lot of voters don't necessarily have their lived experiences being represented in the decision-making process. So it looks like we've got a few more questions. Do people want to come on camera and ask them, or shall I ask them? What works better for people?
Go ahead and I think ask the ones that are in the chat. So
This is from Woodrow. Have any RCV efforts been paired with expanding the legislature and increasing legislative pay and office budgets? This pairing makes lawmakers less worried about losing their seat.
Woodrow, that's a great question. We haven't tried.
Sorry. Actually, I was just hoping. Sorry, my lighting's not the best.
Yeah.
No, I realized one other point to that. And it's good to see you again, Michelle.
Yeah.
Just that. Yeah, but that also, expanding the legislature or the city council would also, and increasing the pay and office budget. I mean, okay, we're dreaming here, but I feel like it could also just make it easier for to get more women to run for office, because I don't know, more of the labor would be split among more legislators, and those are just some of my thoughts. It could be a good pairing, since it's hard to sometimes get incumbent politicians who won on an initial system to want an initial system to vote for something that could disenfranchise, get them out of their seat,
So I mean, I think it's an interesting question. We haven't done a pairing like that with in terms of the increase of the legislature for the state legislature or other bodies. It might be an interesting option in the future. I will say, one, obviously, there's different jurisdictions in the state that have been going through discussions now about how to increase, whether they increase their city council, a county council, whatever it may be. And, many times, and particularly with how some of our rules work around, either if it's a ballot measure or certain bills, you do have to do them one at a time. So it does have to be a single, we're discussing this and approving this, and then, approving this other measure. So there might be some different ways that we'd have to approach that. But I do think, and this was part of my discussion and testimony in past years about us, Montgomery County, getting public financing as well as other jurisdictions, is that if you're going to introduce public financing, you are going to have more candidates. And we saw this. And if you're going to have more candidates, you need to have better systems for voters to elect those candidates. And so we are still trying to get that next step there. But there might be some interesting ways to do that in the future. And we need to brainstorm some more other collective ways to combine things. So, yeah.
Yes, agreed. And the legislator pay, I think, is a really interesting and important issue to wrap into this conversation. I will say that Portland, Oregon offers a really interesting example where a charter commission came forward and expanded the council and changed government up and adopted a form of ranked choice voting. And now they have a super inclusive and pluralistic council that is gender balanced. So that's a good case in point. Great.
I will just say, at the super local level, Takoma Park did address some of those issues, but separately, right? So in terms of the council pay, we had a separate resident committee because you don't want to appear as if you're giving yourself a raise, right? Which is a big issue. So we had a separate committee that gave recommendations regarding council compensation because we recognized that that was a barrier. Another big thing that we did also, recognizing that most people like to step their way up into running for something like city council or mayor. And so we also eliminated some of the challenges that people may have with participating in our council committees. So to just get people into the spirit of being on a commission, being on a board, offering compensation for that, offering reimbursement for childcare, those kinds of things to try to really help people to kind of get their foot in the door, and then seeing a little bit, now we are still grossly underpaid, but seeing that there's a little bit of money tied to it in addition to ranked choice really does help. And I've started to see a little bit more of a diversification in terms of who's actually running for the council seats now.
Yeah. And I actually wanted to touch on a point, Cynthia, you mentioned earlier about like the more civil campaigning. And at the hearing on Wednesday, there was a senator who asked, like, oh, are we just going to be all kumbaya in our elections? And I want to just point out, like, having civil campaigns doesn't mean that you don't still point out the contrasts between you and other candidates and talk about the issues that matter. It just means that you're not going to be negative and tearing somebody down for the purpose of doing the campaign. And I mean, again, if we want elections that are focused on the issues, that's to what Mayor Searcy was talking about earlier, about just how, like, you can have that conversation and say, like, if you really like this candidate and it's for XYZ reasons, here's why you can like me. Here's why I'm a good choice, because I like I'm a good backup, your second choice, because of these reasons. And here's also where we differ. And, like, maybe this is also an opportunity for you to think about, like, how I might be a better first choice because of how I might advance this issue that you also care about. So I really stress that point because there's many issues that we talk about, whether it's housing, transportation issues, pay, whether, at all levels. We need everybody at the table, and we need to be having a discussion about the ideas, not a tearing down of people based on, whatever you want to talk about their personality for. Again, I just want to share that because I think that is, again, what transforms and makes it really interesting for women to want to run and other people to want to run on those issues. I know that there was I did see one question that was related to the cost. Was that related in there or something?
I think Lynn asked a question about an estimate of what a robust voter education program would cost in Montgomery County to mount an RCV election for county council. I don't think that there has been an estimate of that yet.
Well, I did talk to the State Board of Elections Administrator, Jared Demarinis, and was recently just updating some information. The fiscal note was supplied with the bill for HB 1094, it does include a voter outreach line, which they estimated around $300,000, which is both doing, I think they were looking at a combination of maybe mailers and maybe paid ads or other resources. So the amount can vary because obviously, trying to reach, we are one of the largest jurisdictions. It is also a very expensive media market if you're doing ads on TV or even newspapers. So that might be some of the cost there, but there's also, again, to kind of make the pitch for why ranked choice voting, Maryland is here and other organizations, we can help also do that work in terms of we have a coalition that is part of our group. It includes groups like the League of Women Voters, CASA, the Common Cause. We have groups that can help us get into different communities, can help us talk to different communities about how, what's on the ballot, what do they need to be aware of, and have it come from a trusted source. And that's what we need. Like, it's not just on the Board of Elections to make it happen. It is also what we can do in our communities. And, whether you're a candidate, you're supporting a candidate or whatever, it takes all of us to really make sure that we can make that happen. And I'll point out, Rockville was the first city to adopt using vote by mail as vote by mail, all vote by mail elections. And when they did that, they again had to spend money to their budget to like do outreach. They did yard signs, they did ads and papers in different languages. There were postcards that were going out. But every single candidate, and I worked with candidates that were in that race as well, they were doing the work too to make sure people knew that this was a vote by mail election and what they needed to do. And the League of Women Voters and other citizens groups were doing their part at forums and other events to inform people. That's what we always have to do. Voter education, it's the number one thing we have to do, regardless of what's happening on the ballot. Like, if you want people to turn out, people have to be invested in making sure people know what's going on, what's on the ballot, how the voting process is on the ballot, all of when the time to vote or mail in your ballot or whatever. So we have to be invested in that process, and that's an investment in democracy, not something that should be wasted. And we often kind of look at the expenses and say, oh, do we really need to do that? And the answer is, if you want a participatory democracy, yes, you do. That money is a well-spent investment, because you have people who are coming out, sharing their voice, making their voice heard, and who are hopefully electing people that represent their community. So that's kind of like the rough numbers that we have there, but obviously it will depend on what the local board does specifically to do their outreach. But there's lots of opportunities for us to partner with groups on that.
Thank you, Michelle. That's such an excellent segue. Speaking of investment, in order to meet this moment that we are in, which is completely unprecedented, the very foundation of our democracy seems to be in some peril. And I have heard many people say, what can we do? And here we have something we can do. So Mayor Searcy and Councilmember Sayles and Michelle are giving you something. They're giving you the gift of what you can do to help, which is to invest in this important work. And I have committed, ideally tonight, to raise $7,500 to keep this work going, at least until some other money unfreezes, which I'm confident will happen. So if there are about 20 of us on this call, 7,500 divided by 20 is about $350. Now, I'm aware that not everybody on this call can give $350. So if some of you on this call could say give $1,000 or maybe $750, then others of you on this call could give less or sign up to volunteer. That's another way of giving. But I really do think I sometimes I say this, not that you're so interested in my stories of my youth, but I started working, the first member of Congress I worked for was a member of Congress named Bill Gray from Philadelphia, from Germantown, where I grew up. And a gift for him that was like a sizable gift was like $50. And I mean, that was what the starting gift was. And I was that age a long time ago. That was like 1972. I would say most people haven't moved on very much, so they still think, I can give $50. But honestly, think of inflation, think how much things cost, think how much housing costs, transportation, all those things. So I'm hoping to stretch our imaginations in terms of what we think our capacity is. And I'm gonna pony up as much as I can in terms of a stretch gift. And I hope that others do as well. And totally fine if you're not able to contribute, but maybe you can find another way to donate or share the link that I bet Owen is putting in the chat with other people who really care about democracy in our state and in our nation, because I think we have been reminded in all too graphic detail that we can't take for granted what we have in terms of our democratic institutions. And we really need to put our money into this kind of systems change, which, while not a panacea, also is something that we've really got to embrace if we're going to get to have the participatory democracy, as Michelle just said, that we all yearn for.
And to Cynthia, I appreciate you making that pitch, and I'll just share that Owen and I are thinking of some really exciting things that we're going to be continuing to do this year that we want to be able to do, including a potential summit later this fall to really bring together democracy experts and folks from across the state to talk about issues and prepare for the next legislative session, as well as doing some work on local issues in communities. We are planning to do some regular monthly socials, and so we're looking for locations for those, and we'll be organizing in our priority jurisdictions across the state. So you can look for more information on that. But we would love, love your support to make that happen. And, again, we are trying to make sure that we are in the spaces that we need to be to talk to the right folks about what we're going on. That includes our state leaders, includes county level leaders, and includes election administrators. And so there's tons of events that will be happening throughout the rest of the year that we want to make sure that we have a presence there and that we can talk to people to make sure that we're moving things. That's partially why we have such exciting movement on our city activity, is because we've been at the Maryland Municipal League conferences that happen, and through that conference, we've made connections with city officials who've brought us into the conversation and continue to have dialogue with them. And so we want to continue to be present and active. And as we have these cities that adopt ranked choice voting, our work is just beginning with that, because we're not adopting and then leaving. What we're going to be doing is helping with the implementation, helping with the outreach and the voter education, helping talk to other folks about what we need to make sure that everything is collaborating together with our election administrators across the state. So there's a lot of things that we need to do, and we're excited to do that work. And so I hope that you'll make that investment in the work that we're doing, and help us make all those really exciting plans that Owen and I are dreaming up a reality, and can really show that we're a powerhouse in the state. So.
And a powerhouse in the nation.
That's right.
Yeah. I think, what was it on RCV Day? Maybe you mentioned this already, Michelle, but there's a new holiday that you may not have heard of, but January 23rd, 1, 2, 3, easy as 1, 2, 3, is a holiday now, and everybody organizes events for ranked choice voting in states and communities. And Michelle and Owen organized the most number of events of any state organizer. So kudos to them for doing that. But so I really do hope you donate. I hope you'll volunteer, and I hope you'll join me in giving a big thank you to Michelle and to Owen and to Mayor Searcy and to Councilmember Sayles and all the volunteers who are on this call. So really appreciate all of you and each of you for all you do and you bring to this conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Any other burning things people would like to say?
They said, you know what, we're going to step away. We're going to go run the dogs and let everybody cool down.
Yeah.
Okay, so they drove, they left, and it was
the first day
at 2 o'clock. It was the first day we were all together.
We got there at 11.
And then 2 hours later, I get a phone call.
Well, that's good.
And we're halfway back.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you did Talisha leave? Oh, thank you, Talisha. Okay.